This episode is celebrating International Women's Day on March 8th. Cam has been a very vocal advocate for equality for women, especially in country music. She was even named a member of the Recording Academy Diversity and Inclusion Task Force in 2018. It was illuminating to chat with her in this episode, not only about her music, journey, and songwriting process, but her thoughts on closing the gender gap in the entertainment industry and building a music community that is inclusive and welcoming to everyone. Hey everybody, Chris Lindsay here, and you're listening to Pitch List. Join us on a deep dive into the heart of what makes writing songs and making music so magical. Let's find out what makes songwriters tick, and along the way, remember why we love music. Welcome to Pitch List. My guest today roared onto the country scene with a killer, rule breaker of a song. The kind of song you fall in love with the first time you hear it. She's a crazy talented writer and performer and an absolutely straight shooter who sticks to her guns. I hesitate to use the phrase girl power, but she has it. I hope you enjoy hanging with her as much as I did. Here's my talk with Cam. Good morning. Our guest this morning is the fabulous Cam, who I'm a huge fan of, and I'm so excited you're on our podcast. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing really well. I'm, just making my way through this 2020 like everybody else, and I'm optimistic today.
Is it day to day with you? It's day to day with me.
Yeah, every now and then there's an overwhelm, but most days I think I am the underlying current of my being is hopeful and imaginative. So it usually takes over, but every now and then you get run down.
Well, I want to talk to you. Well, first, I want to get some of the basics out of the way. Are you from Southern California or Northern California?
I love that you ask, because I'll tell you what, every now and then I go look at Wikipedia and it's not right. But sometimes I let it slide. Like one time they said I went to law school and I was like, I'm not correct enough. They can think I went to law school. That's fine. But I was born in Huntington Beach, which is in Southern California. It's like Surf City. And then when I was 5, my dad's job moved the whole family up to the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area. So growing up, like my culture and the bubble that I lived in was San Francisco, pride. Like that's the vibe that I come with built in.
That's great. It's such a beautiful part of the country, and it's such a interesting place too. So many things going on out there. Now, I also read you did some work in Portland. Is that right? Did you work on your first record up in Portland?
Yeah. So I back just a couple steps from that. I was working in psychology research, and I had worked at, a couple different universities, and I had done one round of grad school applications and interviews and was about to start a second, and then was like, I should be doing music. Like, got great advice on looking back on your life at 80, what would you regret? And it was like, I would regret not doing music. So as I jumped into this new career path, I took 6 months to just go live with my best friends who were in Portland. And not coincidentally, on purpose, this also was my first friend that I knew that actually did music. I didn't know anyone personally that was doing music and writing music. So I went and hung out with them, made music in the basement in Portland. And that's where I had the dream about a burning house. So Portland is very near and dear to me and my music career.
Well, and it's such a great town. My wife and I used to go maybe once a year to that bookstore, Powell's Book.
Yeah.
It's so amazing. If anybody listening, if you ever travel that area, there's a used bookstore. It's called Powell's Books or City of Books, or you can't miss it. It's a big deal there. it's like a city block. It's the best, coolest bookstore in the world.
Uh-huh. It really is. Anything you want. And it's just fun just to be in there. Like, even if you don't end up leaving with the book, it's fun to be in there.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, well, let's talk about this. So you tell me about this dream that you're talking about for Burning House.
Yeah. So I had dated a guy on again, off again. Like, we were very serious in college. And actually, little known fact, I was in a band. We were in a band together for about 2 weeks. And then we started dating. It was like, we can't have in-band dating. So my bass playing days were cut short. And the two of us, when we broke up for good, it was my call, and it was a real jerk thing to do. And so I was going to see him a few years later when we were in Portland. He was coming up to visit for a party for our mutual friends. And the night before I was going to see him, I was like, oh, I got to apologize for being such a jerk. And it's all water under the bridge, but I want him to know that I know that wasn't cool, you know? And I went to bed that night, like, thinking about how I could apologize. And I dreamt that he was stuck in this house. It was on fire and I couldn't get him out. And instead of leaving and saving myself, I lay down next to him and hold him so he doesn't have to die alone. Like, really heavy, you know, obviously a lot of guilt. And I called up Tyler Johnson, who's been my co-creator. We've been, you know, musical brother basically from the very beginning, who's now doing, you know, Harry Styles records and Sam Smith records. But back then he was just my pal Tyler. And I called him up and told him the dream, and he started playing this riff with it while he was like taking literally the words I just said and singing them back to me. And I was like, oh, this is the best song ever. And we got it to a good spot, but we didn't know what to do for that chorus. And we went in, and Tyler was interning basically, I think at that point, not even officially working with Jeff Basker yet. And, you know, that job you have in the beginning where you're like, you know, picking up people's mail and stuff like that. And like,
you're just happy to be
Jeff,
there.
Yeah. And Jeff is, you know, huge, like Bruno Mars, Beyonce, Kanye. And we showed him the song, and he was like, I have, like, come on in. Like, I have an idea for a chorus, and started singing that sleepwalking, been wandering all night. It's like, oh. So we finished the song together, and yeah, there it was. Started in Portland, but now belongs to everyone.
And it's such a great, I remember when I first heard the song on country radio, I had two thoughts. One is, who the F is this? Number one. I think a lot of people did. And
yes,
two,
yeah.
I love it when somebody does something they can't do, which is, this is a really introspective song about, I mean, it's not that it's not a country song. It is a country song, but it's challenging for a country song. And it worked so well. It's one of those songs that gave me faith in the country business, you know?
I heard that exact sentiment from a couple people, including Casey Musgraves. Like, people, I think for women especially, saying like, I hope this is a sign that people want like maybe more open to things that might be more challenging in a commercial way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, I think you said it though. It's such a great song. I was just listening to it this morning. I hadn't heard it in a while. And as soon as it opens up, it's just got magic. It's just got a magic thing, you know, it's like, it's undeniable. And you know that thing, man, you can't really quantify exactly what that is, but you know it when you hear it. And it's just one of those great songs. Now, you just touched on something that I put in my notes. I wanted to ask you about females in country music on the radio.
Uh-huh.
What are your thoughts on the whole thing? Obviously, there are not enough females on country radio, right?
Yeah. I think that's the main thing that we got to just, why is that? Like, why when women get a shot, do they go into overnight play instead of, you know, daytime play? And why are there so few? And then when you start poking around, like in the not so distant past, there was just these ideas, like what you're saying, it's not like people are saying, I really don't want women. But there are some leftover ideas that are like, women don't really sell, or maybe women don't make big party jams, or maybe women don't. And so when you first, I'm gonna put it in a different arena just to help, like maybe make like an example. When you ask students to rate their professors on how well they did with their course, I took your course, do I like how you taught me? And regardless of the grade you got or your attendance or anything about they made sure that none of that was a factor. Like if you all got A's or you all got F's or whatever, you significantly rate a female teacher lower for how much you thought they did a good job teaching you in the course, even regardless of grades or anything. And that's that bias that's in your head, because you're always secretly, you don't know this, so I know everyone hates to say this, but secretly women do this too. We're looking for a reason to say that you're not the image I think of when I think of country music. I think of a guy in a cowboy hat. So I just don't know if you're country. Same thing when you see like a black singer, like woman or man, show up and you're like, but are you country? And of course there's plenty of black people that are super country, but we don't see that in our mind. And same thing with a teacher, like a professor. You think of a guy, in his suit, and he's here with his lecture, and so you're working against ideas. And so no one's out to be the villain, being like anti. Every day I wake up saying, we will never play another woman. Nobody. I mean, maybe there's one guy, I don't know that guy, but most people, it's just a subconscious bias that you can see in psychological experiments.
Well,
and the way you rate things.
Why I'm listening to you, that makes sense, because you were doing that before you did this. You were doing clinical psychology experiments, probably they design experiments to root all this kind of thing out, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this. So are you saying in the teacher experiment, so even the females were rating the female teachers a little underneath?
Yes.
So you're just 100%. Seeing sort of a cultural, systemic, hate to use that word, that's a hot word right now, but let's just say cultural, like just cultural. Biased
exactly.
of against females. But here's the argument on country radio, because this argument rages all over town. We went through a period of Taylor Swift, Faith Hill before that, Shania, Martin. There have been periods in the very not so distant past of country music where females were running the show.
Well, so here's the breakdown a little bit of that. Running the show as in they were very talented, 100%. How many women were actually on the radio at that time? I'm pretty sure like the highest we ever got throughout the history of country radio was like 30%. Okay. Right now we're down to like 50%. So have there been successful women? 100%. But when you look at it's easy because you can name a couple people that have made it. And same thing, the same argument with race, where you say, well, we have Kane and we have Jimmy and we have Darius.
Right.
And that is totally great. But when you're looking at, music is supposed to be the best. It's not supposed to be give everyone an equal playing field because we're nice about it. You're just supposed to be having the best music because it's great music. And so are you making sure you're getting the best of everyone if deep down you're not giving the rest of these people a shot? So that's where it's like, okay, it's called tokenism. Like you give one person a shot so that then you can say like, oh, we have Darius, so we don't have a race problem, or we had Faith Hill and Carrie Underwood, right. So we don't have a woman problem. So it's really just like the big picture of, and to me, I also like to do another sort of metaphor where like, when you look at baseball, when it was segregated, were you getting the best baseball you could get when it was segregated? So, and that's the thing, is like, no one's saying you got to make sure check all the diversity boxes on every label roster, on every radio station. We just want to make sure we're not missing the the next Charlie Pride, the next Linda Martell. We just don't want to miss like the next Dolly Parton because we discredited them before they had a shot. So, and I think honestly, I know radio gets a really bad rap, but like that's just because they're so important to us. But everyone does this. Like that's how we're saying women judge women. Everybody judges by this same cultural script that we've got going on. So it's happening in labels, publishers, fans do it. Everybody, we all do it. So this is not like one person is the evil mustached villain that is running around town causing trouble. Is all of us collectively, we keep it going, and it's our choice. Do we want to keep it going? And that's where like Nashville, if you look at our history, I mean, those young kids spent time organizing to show up and sit at lunch counters. And does it matter if you can eat at a lunch counter? Like, of course, probably at the time, everyone's like, what do you care about a lunch counter? It's like, yeah, I mean, the point is like, are we really looking at this and making ourselves better and better as we move forward? Because there's no reason to have it. There's no reason to exclude people like that, like for monetary reasons, moral reasons, whatever you want to say. So I know it's a long-winded bit on that, but
love it. And I will 100% acknowledge you kind of opened my brain up there. I hadn't thought of it. Yeah, there were big female acts, but they were as a group, they still were 20% of the market, 25, as opposed to real life where females are at least 50% of the population of humans. That would be
every now and then a
representation.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, is that not even asking, because people say, so you want 50-50 of everything. And like, that's not personally. No, I just want to make sure that you listened as a publisher. When the songs came in, you got to listen to songs by all the people. So we know we really got the best. That's what I want to make sure. And then whoever's the best is on there. Great. If it's all Black women, then great. Like I'm down.
Well, there's a problem in the business, in my opinion. Aside from this, that's exacerbating it. We may not be getting the best for completely different reasons. Some people have really good managers. Some people have political skills. Some people have a lot of talent and they're not good at working people. There's a lot. The playing field is not level for a lot of other reasons besides if you're male or female. And
100%.
That comes into it too. And the other thing is, there has been this idea that country music has a huge female demographic, and that they maybe want to hear some hunky guys singing to take them away from their crappy suburban mom life, which I think the whole argument's bullshit. Really, I've thought it from the beginning, but that's been a prevalent marketing thought I've heard here for 20 years. Well, they don't want to hear another.
I was told that to my face from people working my records. So, I mean, it definitely is not even an old idea. I heard that women don't want to hear songs because of Diane. Women don't want to hear songs about cheating to be reminded about how they were cheated on. I was like, I don't know if you're familiar with the history of country music. That is like our favorite bread and butter is to have.
Jolene. Jolene, how about that one?
So, I think there's a lot to it. But, I do really, I'm an optimist. I really, honestly, I do believe everyone that I run into, we all just care so much about country music. We really do. And everybody is trying to make sure that we've got the best music coming out for us, for our grandchildren. And I love that we're all arguing about how best to make country music. Like that, at the end of the day, I'm so down to shake hands and be like, yes, as long as we're all here for that, I love disagreeing and agreeing and making sure that that's what we're doing.
I agree. And I love that you're doing it. And my 2 cents is, on the artistic side, it would be good for all artists to realize that radio has needs. You
Oh
know what I
yeah.
mean? You know what I mean?
Oh
Radio
yeah.
has needs. They're trying to sell advertising, and they have a certain functions that they need performed by the music that they play, and
Oof.
to ignore that is not a good idea. Now,
Well, and those PPM meters, I mean, they got so much that it is a uphill battle
yeah,
in the radio world right now. Like I
yeah,
do not envy them trying to navigate what's happening. So no, and that's the thing where it's like, it is not radio specific. This is the thing that is happening in every industry all over the place, trying to help ourselves make sure that people can make a living and give good music to the world if you're supposed to be doing that, and making sure that there's no one excluded because of gender, race, sexuality, whatever. So it's it feels, it's just a general awakening. But yeah, radio definitely is getting hit the most with, but I mean, I don't like talking about it and making it feel so radio specific too, because like I have benefited and been like, radio has been a huge support for me,
right,
and so I didn't encounter it in that way.
right.
So that's where it's like, I appreciate that people want to make it about the most. That's why people want to talk about artists too the most, instead of talking about songwriters, because they're the ones in the limelight. But really, this is like, it has very much to do with managers, writers, all the rest of the pieces. So
Yeah, and also just to clear it up, I sort of put the radio thing on you. That's really something that I hear in my world, a
yeah.
lot. There's a lot of talk about that, and I always push back a little bit. But we've covered that enough. I have another. I saw something this morning I didn't know about you, and I want to make sure it's true, but I want to talk about it because I think a lot of people that listen to the podcast are interested in these kind of things because that may be where they're at in their career. It said that you started with a Kickstarter campaign. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did. Basically, I first started and did some music, kind of just, I didn't think I would even be an artist. I was like doing demos, doing like kind of indie projects, and like whoever would help me, I would, just like whatever, taking whatever I could get. And then I was offered, somebody wanted a song for an independent artist. And so I did a single song contract. And I was like, this is the big time. I have pictures of me smiling like, look at this. And it was just a whole bunch of nothing, that was on this contract, which is where I was at. And that company offered me a publishing deal. And I was like, oh my God, this is my big break. So I thought real long and hard about signing with them, and the deal was just really bad because it's like Shark Tank, like when you're worth nothing, people don't want to pay you anything. And I was like, no, I know what I'm worth. So the hardest thing in my career was that first no, and it is amazing. Once you have the balls to say no, oh my God, the world that opens up to you is unreal. So I then said, you know what I'm going to do? You have to be able to back it up, by the way. When you say no to somebody, you got to be able to build it from the ground up. So I said, why don't I ask the people around me to see if they'll donate? Because I know between Tyler and Jeff and I, we can make something that's incredible. And we made about 90% of what Untamed, the first album, was on our own, which is very doable in that scenario with those people and recording. And we raised, I think, $11,000. And I was shocked. I thought everyone in my community would be like, go get a job. We don't need music, but they were so supportive. And we made, including Burning House. And that, then I could go back to record labels and have meetings and say, you don't have to guess what I'm worth. This is what I am. And either you're excited about that or you're not. And we don't have to play this development deal game that so many people kind of get lost in. So yeah, I went in and Doug Morris, who was head of all Sony in New York, we were up in the, super high, all the secret elevators to get to the top penthouse. And he listened to Burning House and was singing along by the second chorus. And he was like, don't leave here without signing a contract with me. And I was like, smart enough at that point. I was like, call my lawyer. He'll get it done. And that was a big deal to be able to pull it off like that. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without those initial, people showing up to say, we'll help you manifest what you're dreaming in your head. Cause you can't make music for free with that many people,
Yeah. And I think it's such a great way to start. It requires nothing other than imagination and a little bit of hard work to organize it. And then I've seen it happen more than once. You were in such a better negotiating position when you made your deal with Sony because of what you did. I'm asking, but was that true?
100%. And not everyone can pull that off. Yep. But if you can, I highly recommend it. And then I also waited to sign a publishing deal until Burning House basically went number one. And that puts me in a totally different spot to negotiate a publishing deal. And those, for me being from California, I know it sounds like lame to talk about business, but or unpoetic, but when you're from California and people can't even be musicians because you can't afford to live in California and be a musician. So you have to be super savvy, and artists and, a lot of times women artists, how long are you getting paid? Everyone else, all my other friends are climbing up a corporate ladder and their salaries are going up and up and up. And most people's trajectories as an artist, it doesn't last forever, so you gotta get paid while you can get paid.
I think it's writers also, artists and writers are like professional athletes. They have an arc of a career where they're going to be productive. And if it's not properly monetized, you can get at the end of that arc and not be in as good a situation as you could. Let's move. I love all of that. I just thought it was interesting. And I think it's something for everybody to know. You have a great success story on Kickstarter. And I think it's just something that's available for everyone. And people should be doing it more. And
I know sometimes people, I think as young people, especially, and artists tend to be young, or we as a audience like young people, or people like signing young people. I don't know what it is, but young artists, I think there's, besides maybe not having the full business and contract, literacy, you also doubt yourself, and you're very trusting in people that say they know what they're doing or have been there before, which is normal, totally normal. But you hand over the keys to your own car, and like you said, if it's not properly monetized, you end up on your ass later. And you really just don't hand them over. You don't owe that to anyone.
Right.
You need to respect people to work with them, but no one else should be running it besides you,
Every successful artist I've worked for, with, been around, has been 100% in charge of their business.
Yeah.
And that includes almost every aspect. Now, everyone has a record label, and that's a collaborative effort of what songs. There seems to be a lot of big rub there, and that has to be worked out, and you can't just plow through your record company. But in general, the successful artists, it's their show. They knew it from the beginning. That you couldn't get them off it with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's always, to me, a marker of an artist I want to work with. As a writer, is somebody like that, because I know they can do it.
I agree.
Yep.
Don't go away. We'll be right back. To watch Cam's exclusive performance of her song, Forgetting You, written by Cam, Tyler Johnson, Lori McKenna, and Mitchell Rowland, visit our YouTube page, Pitch List Podcast.
Hey, I'm just picking out some things I've found out about you that I love. That's what I'm doing.
I love this. This is great.
There's a great quote, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but I want you to talk about it. And it goes like this: if it lights something up inside you, that's what's important, not if it will work on country radio. Do you remember that quote? Is that close?
I'm sure. Sounds like something I would say.
There's a Billboard article.
That is definitely something I would say. Again, like, I love country radio. I'm here because of country radio. Like, but even country radio will tell you if you're like chasing something that already exists or like chasing your own tail, like you're doing reverse engineering of what's on the radio. Like, I know you know this, like, this is, maybe it'll work once or twice, but like this big, like, meaningful feeling that I can get and something that I can be proud of, like, as a legacy is, and things that are just healing for me, is the art of songwriting, which is basically like therapy, which obviously is something I would say coming from this background, but digging into something that I literally can feel in myself. And that's why I moved to do it. And like, I don't know how the songwriting process feels for you, but it is very difficult for me. I am judge myself. I'm like wringing it out of myself, like, it's just so hard. And if I didn't love the idea and really feel like I have to do this right, it would just be, I probably wouldn't do it. Like, I don't think I would follow through enough to, it sounds really empty. It sounds really tiring and empty.
Well, and also unsuccessful. I think radio would tell you, radio guys and gals would tell you the same thing. They want something they can feel, and reverse engineered radio hits. I've never heard it put like that, but I'm stealing that. I'm going to tell you right now. That's a great thought. I'm sure radio people would tell you that. Yeah, that's not what they want because it's not authentic. They can feel on a burning house. You can feel it, and you can't get that feeling by trying to do something like, when I hear people like you who are so successful, when they say it, I want to underline it because it's like, it's
well, and that's the thing is it's like making photocopies of photocopies of photocopies. And like, in the end, like, I get that we have to balance the money and the business part of music business, but in the end, what are we going to be left with? Just stuff where, it sounds like they got paid, like, nobody wants to share that with their kids. And like, I say this a lot too, but music, I said it in my TED talk, but music has existed in every culture since the beginning of culture, in every spot on the planet. There's not like some culture that didn't have it. It is so importantly, necessarily human. And I know that people are trying to make money, and I know we got to survive and get health insurance and all that kind of stuff. But music is so freaking, like, deep down integral to our existence. So like, please don't forget that. Like, people come up, and maybe it sounds cliche now because people hear it a lot, but people come up to you as an artist if you're doing your job right, and they will tell you how you saved their life.
Yep.
And they're not making it up. They really mean it. Yeah. So save some lives, like, show up and do your job. Yeah.
Exactly. I've heard, yes, it's often that you hear those stories and those songs because they resonate with you. They resonate with other people, and the other people can plug them. And it's not like you have an obligation to do that, but I think what you're saying probably, which is true, I think it's more fulfilling. So why would you not? Here's a question for you. I just had it pop in my head. Do you take a long time working on your songs, or do they come out pretty quick, or it's all across the board?
I think the other side, this new album, Classic, was probably the fastest. And it was a very enjoyable process that normally doesn't happen for me. But it was like kind of about love and, easy, like, it was a topic that lent itself to being bubbly and fun. And I wanted it to be like Cecilia and kind of jangly. So it made sense that it sort of fell out. But the rest of them, I spent, like, granted, I had a label switch midway, so it took longer than it would have creatively, but 5 years basically between albums. And I I like to be able to tweak and edit, which some people don't like that. They really don't like that process. And I have to have that. I have to feel so, I mean, I got to let go at some point, but I need to feel like if I wake up in the middle of the night and that line isn't right or that melody should shift, I'm going to do it, I have to do it. So that I definitely take a long time. And I also have to feel, I don't know if you feel this way too, but I also have to feel like I trust the people that I'm working with. Like this was the first album that I took outside songs too. And I really had to trust those writers on a deep level that I was singing a song that meant something, and I didn't have, my fingerprints weren't all over it. And that was a hard thing to do too. So yeah, I'm very intentional and slow.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid if you are.
No. Yeah. I think there's all different ways to do things. And it reminds me of a quote. I don't know who said it, but it goes like, great art is never finished, only abandoned.
Yeah.
And at some point you have to pull out of it, and that's as good as you could do under that time.
Right. Which is so hard.
I can tell for you it is hard because it can always be better.
Yeah. And I really appreciate the style that I've seen, because, I make these albums in LA with Jeff. New York was the song with Jack, and Nashville and LA with Tyler. So I kind of get there's different ways of doing business in different towns. And Nashville is like, we got to wrap up by a certain time because we got to go pick up the kids, and I love that part of country music because, I have a kid. But there's also it's a really wonderful kind of, we're going to do as good as we can today. And then we will go home and you will survive,
Mm-hmm.
And instead of it being this like, oh my God, if I don't get this one song right, everything's over type of feeling. So I appreciate the like craftsmanship, you know what I mean? Like we're good at the skill of it, and maybe not every song, not every song is going to be the burning house,
Right. Yeah, it's just different. They're both good for different things, and everybody has different styles. I think the Nashville thing kind of puts you under the time crunch, which can make some great things happen because you don't.
Yeah.
It stops you from thinking as much.
Yeah.
You get the extreme time crunch for writing the song in the Nashville session. Sort of throws your editor out the window.
Right.
And you just have to sort of go with your little subconscious monkey and let it roll, Yeah. And that can sometimes be really great.
And honestly, this is why I think, people come here. Like Tim Avicii came here to do work, and that's how I ended up working with him and having the title track, The Other Side. Sam Smith came here to Nashville. Like everybody wants to touch this. There's something about what songwriting is here that people want to touch. They want it to rub off on them. And that's why I got to write Palace, with him for his album. And it just, it pulls you in. So every place you write has like a distinct kind of style, and it works for different things, but people really love Nashville for what it is and how it works.
And I'm sure, and that was my next question, because your collaborators are incredible. Harry Styles, Sam Smith, Jack Antonoff, Avicii, and there's more. Tyler Johnson.
Yep.
Like you said, you're probably your oldest collaborator.
Mm-hmm.
These are big pop names, which is unusual for a country record. And that was my question before you started. Can you talk about that? So they enjoy coming to Nashville and doing that process.
Oh, yeah. To start with, when I was on tour with Sam, because after we did Palace together, then I got to go on tour and open up for Sam. And I would ask the audience, in the big arenas, who here likes country music? And people would scream.
Wow.
Just because you assume that same thing, that idea in our head. It's like, oh, it's just, white, rural, southern, suburban folk that like country music. No, no, no. Everybody, whether they admit it or not, loves country music. Loves, loves, loves. And it's because of the songwriting. They love that songwriting. And so the artists, I think most of them, Nashville's a very specific place, so they probably don't know everything, obviously.
Right.
But they know names, and they know what they think is cool, and they want to show up and they want to touch it. Like, I don't know if it's the exact right way to say it, but kind of like how people wanted to touch Muscle Shoals, and people wanted to go touch Laurel Canyon. Like, it's not like there's a sound in a production, but there's a song craft that you don't see other places. It's just not the same, like people aren't writing this kinds of stories and the kinds of emotion. To me, obviously, this is, I'm in this genre, so I love it, but I don't see these kinds of stories and this kind of vulnerability and this turn of phrase that can happen in other genres. So people want that.
Yeah. And I think the same is true when Nashville people go to LA to write. They're interested in that experience, and the get in. Now, Nashville's really changed, and it's become more like LA in the sense of you can go to a lot of sessions here in town now where there's a track in the room and people are top lining the track, which was mostly what was happening in LA. But back in the day, we used to all love to go to LA because it's a different experience. It's fun. It's really fun. But you are based out of Nashville now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I live East Nashville.
Yeah. Awesome. That's awesome. It's been incredible to watch that part of town grow into what it is.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I want to talk about one other thing and then I'll let you go. You took some time after making your first record. Mm-hmm. I did read that you were on Sony. Maybe that didn't work out and you've moved to RCA. But actually your original deal was with both of them anyway, right?
Yes.
So you didn't really leave. You just moved to the sister label.
Yeah. So I was always
how it happened?
Co-signed. So I always had, New York RCA and Sony Nashville, which, is basically like saying you're in Sony, but you have two houses that you live in. And obviously the Nashville one is more responsible for country music, but RCA, has Tyler Childers and, kind of it's starting to do more stuff like that too. So I had, around 2017 when Diane came out, that's when I hit an impasse where we didn't share the same values. So I left Sony Nashville and stayed on RCA New York. And then knowing that obviously I love RCA New York, they do amazing things for me, but of course I still want to, be in Nashville and putting out country music and, have a radio team. And so that's when I also found and fell in love with Triple Tigers and signed with them. So now the joint deal is with Triple Tigers and RCA New York. So same original home, but basically new radio, and I love Norbert and the whole gang over there. So it's been fun.
So a better fit for you with this configuration. It's not
100%.
uncommon. It's not uncommon.
No, not at all.
I mean, it's just especially if your artist and the label just have different visions of what you should be. Now, there's an interesting component to yours. I'm not going to drive it too hard of the values question, but I think that's pretty brave. I'm just going to say that, that's the first time I've seen that, and good for you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you.
Good for you.
I appreciate that.
But it seems like you've got it lined up now, which is
yeah.
Great.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it's, that kind of old saying of like, it's all just for the better. Like once you just gotta be, those relationships are difficult because it's, contractual and it's hard to get out of things, but also like, it is like a marriage where like, you gotta both work at it. And if you don't if things don't line up, like it's going to keep getting worse, you know? And yeah. And I just think we're in a time too, where hopefully, especially women feel empowered to, like, that's the reason that I feel like it's important to at least kind of word it in a way that feels distinct, just so people realize, like, you really, if there is a way for you to take care of yourself, I really hope you take care of yourself, you know, like that kind of thing.
What do you think from here going forward, because you're sort of a voice in this with the female equity issue and or just the quality issue, you know?
Personally, number one, everyone who can stick it out and keep making great music, we need you to keep doing that. And I know the results may not look exactly like you want them to look like, but please stay and keep making music, and don't, like, because a lot of people get scared off or run off, and again, we're losing really great people, you know, and they're like, well, I should go be Americana, or I should go pop, or whatever. And you're like, don't leave. But I mean, everyone's got to do what they got to do. And then I think structurally on the artists are not normally like we're not normally the brainchilds of the revolution, but I'd say hopefully we all start taking on the responsibility, like everybody, that we can make this better, because we're going to need so many solutions at so many different levels that everyone just needs to start like ingesting it and being like, oh, like now like how you're saying earlier, like I see it maybe a little bit different. So now I'm going to look around and like, who are the people that I'm employing, and who are the people I pay and the people I take money from, and what do they look like? And is that because I have the best people, or is it because I did what was easiest, you know? And like that kind of just starting to question things. And like, definitely I've been on those diversity and inclusion boards with the Grammys and ACMs, and there is no like magic lever that we get to pull and everything's just fixed and dandy. Like it just is a constant dance, you know, of trying to get the best music heard and trying to support young artists as they come in. And maybe just something too, that anyone who's in a position in this industry, I know you don't think you're powerful, but everybody's powerful. Like, so even if you have any kind of position in this industry, like every time you compromise or say like, well, maybe we can't do it this time, or you stop being creative about how to make things better, like you're shutting doors for people behind you. And they're going to have to carry that much heavier of a load. And so if you really are thinking about people behind you, I know it's uncomfortable, but just ask the question every time. Like every time I get asked to do a show now and it's an all white lineup, I ask, do you realize this is an all white lineup? Because most people don't even think about it. And then you say, so if you're asking me, maybe you actually could ask somebody who's a person of color or somebody who's a woman, or like, have you asked people? And if you don't know anybody, I have a list that now my booking agency, you know, like they have, and they can send over, here's people to consider. So like in each of your own spaces, like when you're in writing rooms and your publishing company setting up your rights, like every month, like, are you writing with anyone who's a woman? Are you writing with anyone who's Black? Are you writing with anyone who's queer? Like throw some people in that mix, and they won't have the stature. And yeah, that's why you're investing in them. You know what I mean? Like on purpose, so they get there.
Right. There's a lot of hidden value in people that are overlooked.
Oh my God, they work so much harder.
You can find some killers. Yeah. I think keeping it positive is the way to do all that. And you know, I wanted to say one great quick story. Smirnoff Vodka hired this new young company to do their marketing and asked them to go get some plans and bring them back. These guys came back to them and said, here's what you do. You spend all your money backing these electronic music festivals. That's your thing. That's great. They said, are you aware that all these electronic music festivals, there's no female DJs? And they're like, we wanted to wear that. And they're like, so what you do is you pull out of all of them that don't have female disc jockeys or not whatever. remix people or electronic music artists. And they, at first they said, that's crazy, we're not doing it. They eventually did it, and it boosted their sales tremendously because the younger demographic saw that and said, okay, we're Smirnoff people because Smirnoff is doing the right thing. And I think that dovetails with what you're saying is, on the positive note, there's a lot of positive reasons to incorporate diversity. Like we're talking about, there's, lots of great reasons.
No, but the young generation, they're not even coming in with any idea that, like, they're not even having to shift perspective. Like, all of us are having to, like, retweak a few things. They're like, what? How are you even doing it this way for this long? So, no, I think, financially, monetarily, it's definitely not going to, things are going to change, how long it takes, I don't know. But yeah, that's where, that's the obviously forever tug, push and pull of, once you're old enough to get in a power position, are you really in touch with the consumer who's younger? So, I mean, that's right.
That's age old thing. I used to fight with executives in town about female artists, and it'd be a 55-year-old guy saying he doesn't relate to this 21-year-old. I'm like, that's kind of a given, doofus.
Well, and that's the thing is, like,
ask your daughter.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, if you're asking your daughter to tell you what's cool, like, should you be the one running it? And maybe your daughter should be doing it. So we're in a transition, I think. And I appreciate everybody. I appreciate you wanting to have this conversation, because I think a lot of people in Nashville are, afraid of putting their foot in their mouth, or afraid of, ruffling feathers. And I understand that. But I also just think, again, like, all of us care about this we want country music to be a thriving industry and an art form that people respect and care about. And that doesn't just happen because everyone keeps going with the flow. That happens because we all say we want this to be good. And that deserves and requires uncomfortable conversations all the time. So,
and how many female artists have we seen? You may not see as many because you're working on your records, but me as a writer, I see them all the time. They're just fantastic. And then you're like, well, you call a manager and, well, what's going on with this girl? Well, they're not going to sign but one more female this year, and they've already signed this other lady. And it's just like, man,
and that's something that, like, just like you're saying, the radio companies are trying to look out for their bottom line, and then the labels are trying to look out for their bottom line because they think they're not going to get the payback, off of female artists. And it's a whole long list of us, now correcting a lot of things.
One last thing, but I'm glad we talked about that because I think it's important. And I think there's a respectful way to talk about it too. You know what I mean?
Well, that's nice. Yeah. I know Twitter gets a little ugly.
Yes, it does. Before we go, I just want to talk a little bit. Your new record's called The Other Side, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it came out October 30th. First of all, great record.
Thank you.
It's really cool. There's a lot of cool tempo on there. I think it's great.
Thank you.
And so what is the current single off there? Dan and I were going back and forth trying to figure out which one it was.
Well, I guess that's the new question for the new age, isn't it?
Okay, so y'all haven't decided yet.
No. As in, classic is currently at country radio.
Okay.
Redwood Tree is at like AAA or like one of that kind of thing. And then we released Till There's Nothing Left a while ago, and is on like as a single leading up to the album release, and that gets played a lot on the highway, which is amazing, and that song does really well. So yeah. I don't know.
That's the one I thought it was. Okay, but it's so interesting. Just one more quick thing. So we're not totally
and then that'll be the next single, I think. Okay. By the way, so
but you got
depends when this airs, I guess.
you've got a different single at AAA, which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of artists are starting to realize that obviously country radio is where you really want your singles to do well, and you're really excited about it getting played to a lot of people, but also you have a long period of time where you could also have other things going on. And I think country radio is excited about that too, because they want you to be relevant in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I want to just say, first of all, a couple things. One, thank you for being on Pitch List. It's really great to talk to you. I could talk to you for another hour about your process. But I just really appreciate where you're coming from. I love it. And I think you're a really good model for the modern country female act. You know, you really seem to be forward thinking and kind of moving in what I would consider to be the correct direction. So I really appreciate you. And
thanks for saying that.
I just want to say that. In addition to kick-ass music.
No one cares what kind of model you are for whatever if you don't have kick-ass music. So that's the first thing that you got to do. But I think a lot about what's coming next and how these next girls can get, and guys can inherit something that they'll be proud of. And that's hopefully a little bit better and easier than it was in this setup. And I think the forward part of my career is going to be doing a lot of things that I can to like help that move along.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on Pitch List, and I hope we can catch up with you maybe on your next record and see how everything's going. Thank you so much.
Love that. Thank you for asking such wonderful questions.
Awesome.
See you later.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitch List, produced in partnership with the American Songwriter Podcast Network. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcast or your preferred listening platform. And if you want, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating and review. For exclusive content from this week's guest and more, you can visit our website at pitchlistpodcast.com or follow our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. To hear songs written and or recorded by today's guest, check out this week's playlist by finding us on Spotify at Pitch List Podcast. Plus, don't forget to let us know on social media what songwriter, musician, or music business professional you want to hear from next. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.